Today, I'm talking with Luca Dotti, founder and managing director of Homa, one of the most successful co-living brands in Thailand. Homa combines apartment rentals with cafes, restaurants, a gym, a pool, and a calendar of events that builds an international community across the building, and that's why they are so successful.
There is an emotional attachment to the place you stay when you travel or even for extended stay. That forms a big part of your experience.
They have built multiple properties across Thailand and are backed by $250 million with a plan to scale across Southeast Asia. It's easy to see Luca now running a $250 million company and assume he always had it figured out, that he had a plan, that he had the advantages we don't. But that's not what happened.
I saw entrepreneurship more as something that you inherit from your parents. I always loved architecture. I actually wanted to study architecture in school. I grew up in that environment in which you become a doctor or a lawyer, and then you go out and you find a good job in the province we are, and this is your life. So there wasn't much, let's go overseas and pursue your dreams.
Luca's career was the organic growth of a series of decisions, each one going for the next opportunity in front of him.
It was just an opportunity to do it, but we weren't really sure what we were going to do with it.
In this episode, we trace the exact steps Luca took, going from a small town in Italy to a founder of a co-living brand on the other side of the world, and how that leap became his dream job.
If I don't do it now, and I'm never going to try.
I'm Alex, and this is Purposeful, the podcast where I sit down with people who have built careers and lives they genuinely love. First of all, I want to say thank you for building Homa. I really think what you built is amazing. I've seen a lot of buildings, a lot of real estate. As a digital nomad, I'm staying in all sorts of places, and I see so many obvious flaws. Like you build a big building and you don't think about basic things, but I never got that experience in Homa. You know, having like the pool, the gym, the restaurant, the coffee shop, like everything in one place. And for me as a digital nomad, that's the best thing ever, because I get to go to the co-working place, work really well, do amazing work there because I can focus, and then I can switch off. I can go to the pool, go to the gym, make the best of my time and enjoy Phuket. And so that's the reason why we always come back. And I always tell like Phuket is my favorite place, and I think Homa is a big part of that, because just the lifestyle, the quality of life is so high because of Homa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for building that.
Great to hear. Thank you. I think there is an emotional attachment to the place you stay when you travel or even for extended stay. And that forms a big part of your experience. So if you go to any city, I mean, for example, I remember many years ago, I went to Beijing and it was super cold. It wasn't a good time to be there, but I stayed in this beautiful boutique hotel surrounded by little cafes and restaurants, and I have very sweet memories of that trip. And I think that the place where I stayed played a big part of it. After in Bali, for example, my wife and I went for a wedding of a good friend of mine, and we stayed in a beautiful hotels. And I remember of that trip as, amazing. It's like we really had a good time. And the place we stayed at played a huge role.
Yeah, I had the opposite experience. I went to Singapore, which is an amazing city. Everything is great. But we stayed in this very small box hotel. It was super expensive and the quality was just so bad. And that, of course, paints the picture of your trip. But Homa is the exact opposite. So that then leads me to the first question, which is, how did this idea develop? And how did you take this idea and build it? And how does it feel to see it in real life in front of you?
I start from the end. I think, especially coming from finance and asset management, which was my previous life before doing this, which was basically all numbers and a Bloomberg screen, right? We weren't building anything, and it was just like a P&L at the end of the day or week or month. And then moving to actually building physical places where there's nothing today, and 2 years down the line there's actually like people living there and making connections. It's very special. So I remember the very first time we completed our first condo, very small and nothing compared to Homa, but it was an amazing feeling. So building something physical and creating community around real estate is something that definitely gives me a special feeling, and I think that is basically like the purpose. How we came here, it's like it is a long process, right? So I didn't wake up morning and say, okay, I'm gonna build Homa, right? It's been a series of observations that we kind of noted down over the years. The main problem we want to solve is the terrible rental experience that you have when you want to look for a place, especially long term, in these parts of the world, right? And in most parts of the world, I would say, because everywhere the market is strata titled, which means that apartments are owned by individual owners and not by a single landlord that owns the whole building and can control the experience. Then as a tenant, you need to get to the owners, usually through agents, and then you never really know what the experience you're going to get, right? In a building with 100 apartments, you have 100 different owners, 100 different pricing, 100 different fit-outs, and 100 different experiences. I think that is something that we all went through it. I've been renting in Singapore for many years, and you never really develop a relationship with your landlord. Sometimes they're terrible, they keep your deposit, they don't show up when you have a problem, and at best, you get a good landlord, but it's just 4 walls and gives you the keys. Good luck. There's no community building. There is no reason for you to meet your neighbors unless you really want to. And so, especially in a place like Phuket where everybody's new, right? Obviously, you have a local population of people that work, but most of the people come and go. And so, when you have this turnover of people, there is a high willingness of meeting people and making friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think it was really the idea of creating a place where people can meet and how, as landlords, facilitate that. And we try to do it in a condo setting, so where we sold individual apartments and then we're basically organizing events. And it was very difficult because essentially every owner has a say, and there is a condominium association where people can vote and say, no, I don't want your events on the rooftop because I want to sleep. I don't want people coming and going if they're not owners or residents of the place. And so it was very hard to control the experience in that setting. And so we moved that from a build to sell to a build to rent environment or business model where we control the whole asset and we own it, we operate it, and we can drive the experience across the building. So if we want to show a Premier League game at 10:30 at night like there is this Sunday, we're going to show it, right? It doesn't matter. Maybe somebody's not going to be happy. But I learned that you can please some of the people some of the time, right? As Steve Jobs was saying.
And some are definitely happy.
Exactly.
So the game,
some are happy, some are not. But we'll make the ones that are unhappy right now, we'll make them happy with some other events they're interested in. It can be maybe a children activity because maybe those are the ones who want to sleep early and don't want to be disturbed by people screaming on.
It's so amazing for families as well. So many families there, so many children, they having the time of their life.
And there is always somebody that is not happy anyway, right? And it's okay.
Yeah.
And I used to take it very personally when people were not happy or were they're posting bad reviews, and you just learn that you just have to show up at work every day, do the best you can, and transmit that passion to the team, and hopefully people will be happy, right?
I really admire that, we all are part of this world and we see the problems that we have, like renting problem. How are you going to fix renting? If we're ambitious enough, we want to make an impact and change also physical reality. And so how did you get yourself to that position where you're able to create something like Homa?
It really started off with small projects. I remember the first time I arrived to Thailand with a friend of mine and wanted to buy a couple of apartments, and we ended up buying a piece of land because it was just an opportunity to do it, but we weren't really sure what we were going to do with it. There was ups and downs, right? It was not something that just happened overnight, but we managed to design a small condominium building and then sell the individual apartments, raise enough money to build, execute it properly, and then started renting with all the difficulties that we had in the first projects and in the second and the third. But through time, we basically built a bit of experience. And when it came the opportunity to raise more money from institutions to build what is Homa today, then we had a bit more credibility and we had something to show, so a track record. And we were probably confident enough that we could execute something bigger, starting from the first condos were 70, 80 apartments. The first Homa was 500, so it was a big jump. I guess sometimes you need to also take a bit of a leap of faith and just try to make it happen. So I think it was a slow process to answer your questions, and again, I think building the track record was the most important thing.
That's true. That's with anything like baby steps, or not like condo is not necessarily a baby step, I would say, but it's definitely one step lower than Homa, and you always start from there and slowly you can raise your bar and execute. I just wonder, you grew up in Italy and then you moved to Singapore and now you're here in Phuket. So how did you came to Asia and what made you stay?
I studied in Italy and then I studied engineering. And during those 5 years, I went to Sweden for an exchange program with the Erasmus. And when I came back, I started working for a Swedish company, Tetra Pak. And I finished my last year of university while I was working with them. And I really loved the company, super international. They were posting every day new jobs in different parts of the world. And obviously coming back from Sweden after a year of exchange program to my little town in Modena, I felt very small. And I said, okay, Tetra Pak is really the opportunity to go somewhere. And I didn't know where. It could be anywhere. And then one day, a job post in Singapore came up. And in Sweden, I remember I met one of my fellow exchange students, a girl from Singapore that told me amazing things about the city and how progressive it was. And I'd never been to Asia before. And so I said, okay, this is probably it. I didn't know anything, but it sounded great. And I could have gone anywhere, really. And so I applied, and then I managed, it wasn't easy, but I managed to convince the managing director, which was a Brazilian guy in Singapore, to hire me, and that's how it started. 2009, I went to Singapore for a management program. It was supposed to be 3 years, and then I got there, and I actually loved the city. I didn't love the job. It was very technical, and again, I was coming from an engineering background, but I was in Europe with Tetra Pak. I was more like a supply chain management role, so it was a bit more dynamic, and it wasn't really super technical, while that was actually the job in Singapore, so I didn't really like it. But I love the city, and I said, okay, I want to change. That's how it also started. The boss of a friend of mine from London came to Singapore. He had opened in Switzerland his own asset management firm, and he wanted to open an office in Singapore. I met him in Singapore, and I told him I want to change job. And he said, well, I'm looking for somebody. And he said, well, maybe we can work together. And I remember that conversation in which basically said, look, I don't know anything about finance. And he said, well, but you can learn that, but I need somebody that I can trust more than somebody that knows finance inside out. He was, and he still is, a big advocate of CFA Institute. So he told me, go and study for the CFA. I'll pay for you.
What's that?
He's a chartered financial analyst, basically 3 exams once a year, so 3 levels, and a very complete finance course. Quite hard, so you need to study a lot, but he gave me the time, and the fact that most of his time was in Europe allowed me to basically study in the morning and then work during afternoon and evening when he was awake. Right. So it kind of worked quite well, and that was actually a great way to learn the job that I was doing, but also a great way to get a financial education that I never really got in school. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, I mean, in Italy, they don't really teach you that. And even in university, I did probably 1 exam of corporate finance, but there's no capital markets, there was nothing. My dad was a doctor, right? I mean, he had no financial literature, and so you have to trust somebody, your banker or something. People don't know anything about finance, unfortunately. So that was a great way to learn, and it's something that I obviously carry with me today because it can obviously help me with my job, but also my investments.
Absolutely. I really like from the story that you said, I don't know anything about finance, but you can trust me and I will learn. It's something that sometimes you can be ready but not worthy, and sometimes we stop ourselves because we think, oh, we're not worthy because we don't have all the skills, we don't have everything. But sometimes all you need to do is say, I am ready, and it's up to the other person to determine if you're worthy or not. And if they think, I think you can get it done, and you have that confidence in yourself, then you can learn it. And it's finance, it's not easy, but it's also not rocket science. Lots of people have learned it, and
it doesn't apply to any job. There's like certain things that you just cannot learn as easily, but especially nowadays with the access to information, all the AI tools, you can, if you want, you can really learn a new discipline, and it's all about determination. And as an employer, I love to see that drive into people, and actually be trustworthy is something that you cannot learn. You can learn marketing, you can learn finance, you can learn accounting, but you cannot learn to be trustworthy. It's much more important. With hindsight, I really understand. Most of the time, I need to hire this guy. He's going to be my first employee. He's going to see everything in the company. And if he doesn't know bond valuations today, maybe it doesn't matter. It's more important that he's somebody that I can trust, and I can send him to deal with banks and counterparts and represent me properly, even though technically he's not ready.
So that's definitely something that is very, very important. And so you want to get yourself in situations where you can do great things and not rob yourself because maybe you lack the inner confidence to pursue those opportunities. I'm curious, how did the story then continue? You were in Singapore, you started this company.
I joined Valeur with Lorenzo, which was my boss, and then he set up a small team. We ended up being 5 at some point, but I was the first one, so I was really the ones that I really saw the whole journey, and it was quite inspiring. It became very successful, and then Singapore actually ended up a small office, because then in Europe it grew into 6 offices right now. There's probably like 80 people. That was very inspiring for sure. And I said, okay, I would love to maybe become an entrepreneur myself at some point. And for as much as I was loving that journey, I could see that I was never going to become the boss there. And there wasn't really a path to partnerships, etc. It's a good job, it's exciting, we're growing, you're well paid, but I felt that like I wanted to experience that same kind of like entrepreneurial journey myself. And when I started having a little bit of savings on the side, and that was a period in which real estate in Asia was booming. And I remember the apartment that I was renting with my flatmate doubled in price in the span of a couple of years, right? Wow. And we always joked and say, oh, if we only had the money, right, to buy this instead of renting it. It was like, oh wow, maybe there is an opportunity to do something in real estate. And I always loved architecture. I actually wanted to study architecture in school, but then my dad told me, there's too many architects in Italy, just be an engineer and you'll find a better job. I grew up in that environment in which my family was like, okay, you either become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, and then you go out and you find a good job in the province we are, and this is your life. So there wasn't much, oh, let's go overseas and pursue your dreams, and do you want to be whatever, like an artist? No,
safe and respectable.
Exactly. So there was no such things. So I had architecture in the back of my mind. So real estate is something that like I was attracted to, and obviously like in a dynamic environment like Singapore where people were building and launching new projects, and similarly a little bit like here is like the launch of a project of a new condo or a new real estate project in Singapore was like an event, right? It was like I'd never seen something like this. And it was like selling cars. We were like promoting it, and there was branding behind it, and there was like taking these ballrooms in Mandarin Oriental, and they were selling 90% of the condo units in a project over the weekend, and it was like crazy. But obviously there was no place for me in Singapore. I mean, it was like the barrier of entry was too high.
Right,
I mean,
it was
like I was never going to go anywhere with my little savings. And so I came to Thailand. I remember that Thailand was informed choice, because here as a foreigners you can own freehold condominium. I mean, there is a little bit less protectionism than in other parts of Asia, Philippines or Malaysia, but Thailand was better. And I came here, and the idea was maybe we'll buy condos and we start renting and see what happens. And that was kind of like a way to access real estate in a way. And then when I came here, I remember that I met my current co-founders to this day, which were engineers. They had an engineering firm here in Phuket. They were working with a lot of developers and Italians as well, so that's how we connected. And then the following 3 trips that I made to Phuket, an opportunity came up to buy this piece of land from another developer that went under. It was a foreclosure from a bank, and there was this piece of land in Chalong already with licenses and drawings, and we just had to raise the money and build these small condominiums. Okay. They had all the technical abilities to build, and they were missing more the commercial sides of things. And I said, well, maybe I can help you with this. And that's how we started. So their role was more like the construction side. My role was putting together a marketing deck and fundraising and try to sell some units to finance the construction.
So that was like the journey of the start of your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So it wasn't planned, it just happened. And it's something that I was doing on the side as I was working for Valeur. Like I was doing this over the weekend or mornings, and when I wasn't in the office, I was taking some meetings in Singapore. And obviously there was a lot of expats in Singapore that were saving money, not enough to buy real estate in Singapore because, again, the bar was very high, but they wanted to diversify and invest. And obviously Phuket was an attractive choice, right? It was a lifestyle component, same as Bali. So there's always been these two flows of capital from Hong Kong and Singapore going towards either Thailand or Indonesia.
And that's where you raised money?
Mostly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the idea there was like there's a lot of hotels and villas, but there isn't really apartments for rent for people that work in Phuket. People that were working in Phuket at that time were international school teachers. In particular in Chalong, there's a big community of fitness instructors, of fighters, etc. People that didn't have the budget to rent a villa. Then obviously hotels was not the solution for them. And there was not a lot of options back then. It seems crazy because now there's so many condos. But like 15 years ago, there weren't. And I remember there was a small project really badly executed in Chalong, which was actually like renting incredibly well because it was the only place that resembled a modern condominium. And so, okay, we are this land is in a better location. If we do something a little bit better than these guys, I'm sure we can drive better rentals and fill it up. And that was the thesis. And a lot of the buyers were telling us, I can invest, $50,000 to buy an apartments, but there's no way I'm going to manage this. So we had to create a management company. So, which is something that we didn't envision at the beginning. At the beginning, we thought, okay, we just build it and sell it, and we move on. But then we had to manage because otherwise people were not going to buy. And so that's where the management company and the business of operating the asset really started, from the necessity. There was a point in which I said, okay, I really would like to step out of my comfort zone and my comfortable job. I want to see if we can just become an entrepreneur full time. But it was a bit of a weird moment because the business in Thailand wasn't big enough to pay a salary, and it wasn't mature enough to really see that as a potential scalable business because it was just big. So I said, okay, I like this idea of being an entrepreneur. I want to take a break from my job. There was an opportunity. Over the years, I met many people going to INSEAD in Singapore, which is probably the best MBA that there is there, and is a big entrepreneurship school. There was these statistics I remember that I read. More than 50% of the students after graduation, they opened their startup within 5 years. And so, okay, wow, they really trained you to think as an entrepreneur. So I decided to leave my job, go to INSEAD for a year, also regroup a bit of thoughts and say, okay, what can be next? Is it this business in Thailand or is something else? I just wanted to do something different. These venture builders are a little bit more like a faster track and maybe a more effective way today. For me, it worked well. I think it was very interesting to kind of, after so many years, I basically worked for, 10 years before doing an MBA, and I think it was interesting to take a pause and say, okay, now I'm gonna focus on my next stage, and then whatever it's gonna be. I wasn't sure I was gonna become an entrepreneur right after, or was gonna work for something else. But that was for me like an opportunity to break out from my job, which was asset management, and more about what's gonna be next. And I already had some investments here in Thailand, which were basically coming online because we were completing our first condo projects, and we're starting renting it. So we moved from the development stage to the management part, and that's where we saw that the market was quite interesting, and probably we should have focused on scaling the business. Really, when I was at INSEAD, it was quite interesting because I could almost bring a live case to a class of entrepreneurship and say, this is happening today, and I have it. It's live. It's just very small. Can become big, and can be a job after. So that was
because it's not just a job. It sounds like it's really more than you were already quite business oriented beforehand, right?
Yeah, it was a side project, right? It's one of the. I had my day job, and I was going to work Monday to Friday, but then on Friday night. Actually, on Saturday morning, because I was working on European hours. So I was working from midday to 10 at night, or 2 p.m. to midnight. And then on Saturday morning, I was taking a flight to come to Phuket from Singapore. It was like an hour flight. And then I was here on Saturday, Sunday, catching up with some work, obviously taking maybe an afternoon off on Sunday.
And you did that every week?
And I did that for a few years. And then on Monday morning, taking a flight, coming back and show up at work at 2 p.m. on Monday.
Oh, man.
But it was exciting because it was kind of I was coming here to do some work, but it was also nice to be here. My brother was here for a year and a half, so it was also nice to see him and catch up with him, and he was helping me really at the beginning. as kind of like people I could trust on the ground. And so, yeah, it was fun times. As I was going through INSEAD, about halfway through the year, we completed the first condo here and we started renting. And the rents were super good. It was like demand was huge. And so, okay, we're on to something.
Okay.
So can we do more of this? Can we scale it? And that was kind of like the question that I tried to answer in the second part of my journey at INSEAD. And then it was really interesting because you could choose the courses you wanted to do. And obviously I was picking all the courses that somewhat teaching, building a venture, right? And the fact that I already had a little bit my idea in mind on hand made it more exciting and in a way easier because I had a concrete example of what I want to do. The difficult part is like not many people were talking about building real estate ventures, right? It was usually tech ventures. But, it was interesting. And so after INSEAD, I said, okay, I want to try to do this full time. I remember that I didn't have a salary, right? And so you learn to live with very little. And then I took some consulting jobs here and there just to survive a little bit. And then in the meantime, we fundraised for the second condo, which was much easier than the first because we already had a track record. We can show people, hey,
you can show the numbers.
We have done this. We know how to do. We know how to build, and we're renting really well. So these are the numbers. And I remember the second and the third one were very easy. But then we wanted to make it bigger because, again, it was still baby steps. That's where the idea of Homa came up. And there was no branding. It wasn't Homa. It was just like, okay, can we do something in scale? The idea came through a fourth co-founder that joined us, Blake, and say, okay, let's raise a private equity fund. So let's do a big fundraise upfront, not selling individual units. The focus was always on selling the next apartment and not really on building the rental experience, which is really the product that we wanted to build. But we're always chasing the next sale because that was the lifeline. So everybody say, okay, if we do a big fundraise, we do a big effort right now, then we forget about fundraising for a while and we focus on the product. That was life-changing for us. We were lucky because we did that fundraise right before COVID, and then we built through COVID without worrying about finance. We just had to focus on the product.
Where did this idea come from? From combining the pool, the gym, this rental experience, the community?
The facilities is something that, like, obviously you see in every condo, right?
Yeah.
Especially in Singapore, there's like amazing condominiums, fantastic facilities.
Yes.
The problem is they're always empty because nobody activates them. A developer will sell every apartment to individual owners and then move on.
Yeah.
They don't care. The condominium manager, which is the Knight Frank or CBRE of the world, they're just there because they need to do pool maintenance and landscaping, but they don't care about creating an experience.
Yeah.
Every owner then has to go out, finds his own agent, and then rents, compete on rentals. There's no community building. There's no experience curation.
Yeah.
And so it's okay, why don't we build that product? But then we combine it with the community management. And you could see bits and pieces of this. It's not that we invented hot water, but there was already this concept of co-living around the world that came up.
Were you doing that research, looking at these different places?
Yeah, so I remember that a friend of mine in Singapore, he was a Franklin Templeton, one of the biggest asset managers in the world, and they invested in this company called My Town in the Philippines. And there was basically the first kind of example of co-living.
Okay.
And then I went to see it. It was a much more basic product, but the principles were very similar to what Homa is today, right? Is create that safe place where like-minded people can live and connect. We took ideas here and there, and then we combined it with obviously the design and all the cool things that we saw in Singapore or around the world. And then we also kind of pivoted a little bit in some things like co-working. I mean, when we started, the co-working was basically just 200 square meter room. There was no real thinking or design about that. But then with COVID, we saw that everybody was on Zoom all the time. We say, okay, we need to design meeting rooms and pods and soundproof them and make it really a productive space, because we could envision a lot of people start working remotely. And obviously, at that point, there was no reason to be in an expensive city like Singapore or Hong Kong. It was a no-brainer to move to Bali or Phuket and work remotely from there. And so we need to create a space for these guys. Good internet, a place where you connect. And
that was exactly me. Like when I arrived, I thought like they built this for me. I've been in so many co-working spaces, and you would think that every co-working space would think about how can people be as productive as possible, what do they need. Pods is so essential to that, and I've been in at least 10 co-working spaces, and they have like maybe one pod there in the corner, and you have to pay a ridiculous amount to have a meeting. So you're not gonna do that. So I think you did something extremely well there.
Yeah, and again, the first one we're only 6, and the ventilation is not great. We made a lot of like mistakes in the first, but then we solved it in the second. I think the fact that we build and manage spaces teaches us a lot of things, because we can take all those learnings and apply them to the next project, and you're just like, oh, actually, like the lobby is really like a great meeting space if you design it in a way where people can sit at every corner, and it becomes that place where just people come together, right?
Yeah. So many details that I find you did very well, and definitely the learning takes, but you also implemented that. And I think lots of builders can do all those learnings, but you don't always see them implemented. But I'm generally curious, like now that you see this project being there, people living, working, all this community, how do you feel looking back at that?
I think probably I don't stop enough to sometimes appreciate all the things that we've done. But yeah, it's great to see a place and remember that it was just bare land, and now there was 1,000 people. There's basically a neighborhood connecting and living and being happy and productive like yourself. And the interesting thing is that it's not just the site itself, not just the project itself, but the surrounding neighborhood that has been developing around us. Because obviously once we plug in 1,000 people community, then all the services started popping up around. So the laundry, the restaurants, a Jew shop, cannabis shop, obviously.
But also these wellness spaces, they have sauna, an ice bath,
of course,
all of that. So many great things on this area.
And I like to think that like they chose their location because they're close to us, because obviously there's like a captive audience there, right?
Yeah. I just wonder, like now you're in this position and you built this. When you came out of school in Italy, is that something that you envisioned? Is that something that you wanted to do, or?
No idea.
No idea. Okay.
I mean, you just don't. You cannot envision that you graduate from a small town in Italy and then you end up living in Southeast Asia. You know, my kids are born in Singapore and Thailand.
But did you have some idea what you wanted to do with your life back then, or no?
Yeah, I thought, I was going to become a manager of a company here, and
not even entrepreneur?
Not really.
Okay.
Because I wasn't really surrounded by people that. My parents had their own business for a period of time, but it was more like a side project for my dad, and my mom was helping. But I wasn't surrounded by people, and I think in general, like I saw entrepreneurship more as something that you inherit from your parents. In Italy, your dad is a business, and will pass it on to you one day. So very few people started their own business, and I think again this is one of the reasons also. I think going to a school like INSEAD helps, because you're surrounded by people that actually want to be an entrepreneur, and so it's possible.
Well, I think that's also very inspiring, because lots of people come out of school, they don't know what they want to do with their life, and they feel like they need to figure out everything as they come out. But your story is amazing. You clearly have created a great impact, good at what you do, great financial success for the projects you've built. So it's an amazing story.
I was very stressed. It's what am I going to do? And then now I need to find something that I like to do, and obviously being financially rewarded. And then you pass to a stage, maybe in your early 30s, and say, I need to find purpose. And what's my purpose? Is my purpose just like going to work every day and what am I going to do? Or maybe my purpose is just being a dad, and which is, again, great, right? I think it just takes time, and you want to just keep your options open, and life happens, and you just need to be open to opportunities, really. I just jumped on the opportunities that I had, and without thinking too much about it. You need to be a little bit reckless sometimes. Too. There's people that have it figured out when they graduate, but I wasn't like that for sure. You just need to, I think keeping your options open is probably the best, because then you just allow life to happen. You don't know. And I don't know now. And I have a family, but I don't know. I don't own any property apart from Homa, but I don't know where I'm going to be living next year. Maybe we move to Bangkok, maybe not. We keep our options open. Where do we going to live after this? I don't know. I don't know where Homa is going to take us, or anyway, life. So I think that also creates a level of excitement, right?
Absolutely.
It's quite cool.
But also, like you told me, like there was a period where you had this great job, it was comfortable, and you had to step out of that comfort in order to...
Yeah, I think that also comes a little bit with, again, being a little bit reckless, and say, okay, my dad thought that was crazy. But then, okay, I'm on the other side of the world. I don't have kids, I don't have family, and if I don't do it now, then I'm never going to try. So I think that was that was probably like the reasoning behind it.
This was great, Luca. Thank you so
you.
much. Where can people find you? Is there anything you would like them to refer them?
Physically, mostly in Phuket, and I can leave you my email and so that people can write to me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Luca. This was great.
Thank you.